All the time. God is good. Amen. As it has been announced, as part of our 20th anniversary, each month we have a program that we do until the culmination of it in June. So for this month, it is earmarked that we will have a financial education, and we have various topics that we are honored to have in our midst. We reach out to the mayor's office and the mayor's referrer, a resource person, in the name of Robin Scott, Vice President of Financial Solutions Manager, First Commonwealth Bank. Miss Robin, you are welcome.
So good afternoon. As he stated, my name is Robin Scott, and I am a Vice President Financial Solutions for First Commonwealth Bank, as well as part of my duties is I'm in charge of small business banking. So I help small businesses expand. I help them find resources, money, equipment, whatever their needs are. So I'm a specialist in that, as well as community development. And part of community development is doing things like this. It's reaching out to the community and assisting them, the people in the community, and whatever resources they may need. And right now, there's a big push for financial education. I also teach financial education in the school system, and right now I'm teaching at a school that's not far from here, right up on Morse Road, the Columbus Humanities, Technology, and Arts Academy. I teach the middle schoolers financial education because that's where it needs to start with our children. Teaching them so that they can learn at an early age, and then when they become adults, they will be able to thrive and they will be very successful. It is also one of my passions is teaching adults, because as adults, if we don't have that information, then we cannot pour into our children. We cannot pour into them what we do not have. So some of the things we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about saving, we're going to talk about budgeting, and we will talk about credit. And those things that are really important. And I always start off with saving, because saving is really the foundation of everything. If you don't have the money, then nothing else will happen. You need to be able to pay your bills, you need to be able to feed your family, we need to be able to have a place to live. So those resources are going to be very important to us. The key principle to saving is, first and foremost, you must pay yourself first. So that means when you get your paycheck, before you pay anyone, you need to set money aside for yourself. It could be $10, $25, whatever you can do, but you have to start there. You need to have an emergency fund so that if something comes about, your car breaks down, or a child gets sick and you have to pay for co-pays or medical expenses, or medications for your child. Anything like that. If you own a home and you need a repair in your home, what would you do if you don't have those resources saved, if you don't have money? Credit comes along later, but you got to have the money first. So that is very important. So when thinking about saving and setting up a budget, the first thing you want to do, as I said, pay yourself. And then you'll put that money, hopefully, in a savings account at a bank. And just to let you know, in the United States, how important savings is that the federal government has set aside regulations that say you must, when you have a savings account, I'll put it this way, when you have a savings account, you can only take that money out so often. If you take the money out more than 6 times in a statement period, which is like a quarter, then there are penalties for that. That's how important saving is to the United States and to the federal government here, that those regulations are set forth. So I say all that to let you know that the United States is a group of consumers. We just are. We spend way too much money on things we do not need. That's the difference between the rich, the wealthy, and the poor. Because there's a difference between rich and wealthy. I often tell the students, or even when I'm speaking to adults, that wealthy is, okay, now Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, those people are wealthy. If Warren Buffett or Bill Gates woke up and they had LeBron James money, they would be devastated. And most people think of LeBron James as being an extremely wealthy person. But somebody pays him. So there's someone wealthier than he is that writes his paycheck. That's the difference between wealth and rich. Okay, so I want everybody to understand that, because that's really important. It's so important that, capitalism is what America's built on. And what I teach, specifically people that look like me, is that we don't want to get caught up in that. We don't want to get caught up in spending more money than we have. Matter of fact, you should live well below your means. The standard for housing expenses would be 30% of what you make. Now, not 30% of what you make, but 30% of that paycheck that you bring home. So to run your household, to pay your rent or mortgage, should not be more than 30% of what you bring home. Otherwise, you're paying way too much. I don't want you to get caught up in buying things that you don't need. Everyone needs some mode of transportation. So you might need a car, but everybody doesn't need a Mercedes. You can drive a Honda Civic, you can have a Toyota, you can have whatever. But many of us get caught up in having car payments that are well beyond what we can pay. I know people who have come to me to help them get their finances in order, and their car payment is more than their rent. And I ask them, unless you plan on living in that car, why are we doing that? It makes no sense. So, how I would want people to do it, and how the wealthy do it, they prioritize their needs, investments, and then their wants. Whereas most people do their wants, their needs, and then investments. And when I'm speaking of investments, I'm not thinking about stocks and bonds and trading on the stock market and all of that. Sometimes investment is in education. Sometimes that investment is starting a business, because you're going to pour your resources into those things that will give you a return, that will bring something back to you. A car is never worth as much as it is from the time you drive it off the lot. As soon as you drive that car away, it's not worth the money you paid for it. It's not worth the money you paid for it. And also, contrary to popular belief, a house is not an asset. If it's not bringing you money, it's a liability, and you're paying for that house every month. So it's not an asset. What I tell people to do a lot of times is buy a house and don't live in it. Buy a house and rent it out. Let someone else pay for it. That's an asset, because it's bringing you money. It's bringing you wealth. It's bringing you something. But if you live in it, it's a liability until you pay it off. And in America, that's 30 years for most people. So when I'm teaching, I'm letting them know that's the way the majority population does it many times. And that's what they teach their children to do. So I've taught my children to do the same thing. None of my children, even though I've gone to college and have multiple degrees, none of my children are college graduates. They're all entrepreneurs. Because you cannot get wealthy working for someone else. You cannot. Set up that way. It's set up for you. So if you're your own boss, you determine how much money you make, how much effort and how much hard work you put into that is going to determine how much you get back, how much money you make. So for all the children here, I'm not deterring you from going to college. Go to college. Because my sons went to college, they took some business classes, they learned just enough that they needed to know to run their businesses. And then they stopped. One of my sons, just to let you know, is a barber. And someone was saying, he's just a barber? And I'm like, yeah, he's a barber, but he owns his own barber shop. And right now, 6 of the Cleveland Cavaliers are his clients. He has several people on the Cleveland Browns are his clients. He has New York Yankees. He has businessmen that fly him out to Miami once a month just to cut their hair. They fly him out, they pay all of his expenses, and then he still charges them $300 for a haircut. Yeah. So a trade sometimes is so much, because we're always going to need carpenters. We're always going to need plumbers. We're always going to need electricians. So think about that when you are doing it. And you're saying, what does this have to do with financial education? That's everything to do with financial education. Because if you're your own boss, nobody can fire you. And although I have reached heights in my career, and I'm a vice president, people say, well, that's amazing. It is. But you know what? If things start going bad at the bank, I could go to work one day and they could tell me today's my last day. They could tell me today's my last day, then how do I feed my family? So I also have a business on the side to make sure that it doesn't matter. So what I want you to do is when you're thinking about your needs, that only includes clothing, shelter, some place to live, food, and like I said, the ability to get back and forth so that you can get to your job, you can get to school, you can do whatever it takes to get those things done. Daycare is a necessity for those of us who work and have small children. There was a time, and thankfully I was blessed, I didn't have to work with my children were young. But I also couldn't, if I had gone to work, I would have just been paying for the daycare. That's because I have 2 sets of twins. I have 4 sons. Yes, and then we have a daughter as well. So when you have 2 babies at a time, and then 2 babies at a time, and they're only 4 years apart, so they still weren't in school, it wouldn't have made sense for me to go to work. It wouldn't have been. So daycare is a necessity. There's some things that are not necessities, but we put them in our budget every week. As much as we like to get our hair done, ladies, it's not a necessity. We can do it ourselves. We can definitely do it ourselves. We love to get our nails done, but it's not a necessity. We can go without it, or we can learn to do it ourselves. Eating out is not a necessity, it's a luxury. So when you're putting it in your budget, you might set aside things like that, and what we call it in our house, it's just fun. It's our fun account. But out of that comes any time we need to eat out, it comes out of that, and then you know what? We set aside a certain amount of money every month, and that's what I want you all to do. Think about it. Set aside a certain amount of money every month. Once that money is gone, you don't get to go out to eat anymore. The kids can't go to, whatever fun event they want to go to. That's it. So that's why you have to be very, very careful about the things that you're doing when you're setting aside this budget for yourself. So you know how much your utilities are going to be roughly each month. Also, contrary to popular belief, a cell phone is not a necessity. Cell phone is not a necessity. And if you get one, that's fine. You can have a cell phone. I'm not saying don't have a cell phone. But what I am saying is we don't all have to have an iPhone 14 Pro Max. We don't have to have a $1,600 cell phone. You don't. What has happened is Apple is one of the best marketing companies in the world because what they've convinced you is that every September when they release that new phone, that you have to have that one because the old one is obsolete. If that phone still rings, and you can send out a text message, that phone is still good. That phone is still good. So why are we then getting ourselves all in a frenzy thinking we need to go out and get the biggest and the best and the brightest and the newest and the shiniest phone there is? That phone is still good. That phone is still good. And there's other phones out there actually that work better than iPhones. But what has happened is Apple's got us all confused because marketing is part of financial education. That's what those companies are out there. They're out there, and a lot of us are going to watch the Super Bowl tonight, and there's going to be some amazing commercials on there. They're going to tell us what we need to buy. I know all about it because my first degree is in marketing and advertising. So all that is to get you all riled up to think that you need to buy it. We don't need anything that's coming in those commercials tonight. Not one thing. Not one. But that's what happens. And so then our budgets go haywire because we see that. And then parents, we want to please our children. So we give them things that they don't need. Nobody needs a pair of Jordans. I don't care if they're the 12s. I don't care if they're the 6s, the retro 1s, Dunks. We don't need any of that. We don't. As far as I'm concerned, anybody who does not have a job does not need a new $200 pair of shoes. They don't. Nobody who doesn't have a job doesn't need a $200 pair of shoes. I see some people in here that are in my class at school. And so they've heard this before from me. But they don't. I have a 15-year-old, and so my daughter, what she does is she's very creative because she's heard her mother talk about budgeting. She's heard her mother talk about money and how you what you need to do to get the things that you want. So she filled a need at her school. The vending machines were down, and they weren't working when they got to school this year. So what she did is she came to me and she said, "Mom, we need to go to Costco." I'm like, "Well, what's that Costco that we need?" She said, "Let's just go." So we go to Costco. We buy 2 huge boxes of snacks and 2 big boxes of the juice pouches. My daughter fills her backpack up every day with books, and she fills another backpack up with snacks. She takes them to school and she sells them. So she's got a side hustle. She's got a business already. She's got a business, and so when she wants those shoes, she's got to pay half. She already learns about budgeting. She already knows how you get the things that you want. First of all, hard work. And then secondly, you gotta work hard. You gotta budget. You gotta set that money aside. It's not a need for her. She knows all her needs are met. All her needs are met. That's a want. So those are the things I'm talking about that we don't need, but we've convinced ourselves that we do. Ladies, some of us have, and I'm a victim, I will admit. I remember when we moved from our first home to our second home, I took over 150 pair of shoes with me. Over 150 pair of shoes with me. My husband didn't even know. He was like, "Wait a minute, where are all of these shoes coming?" He didn't realize that I had that much. Did not need that stuff. That means if I wore those 1 pair of shoes every day, I could only wear them twice a year. I could only wear each pair of shoes twice a year if I wore them. And there's some shoes I hadn't worn in months. Actually, some of them had never been worn. They still had the clean soles on the bottom of them. So I admit sometimes I get caught up in it too. It's very easy to do. But I don't want you to do that. I want you to make sure that, like I said, you pay yourself first, then you pay your necessities, then any money that you have that's left over, that's what you have for the wants. And really, there's other things that you want to do out of that extra money. We want to put aside money for our children's education. We want to put aside money for investments. When I talked before about stocks and things like that. Because that's another vehicle of income. Those things pay interest, they pay you dividends. And so I like getting that check every month when I see it come into my account, because it's dividends from the stocks that I've purchased. So I want you to think about that. I want you to think about generational wealth, because I can't leave my children any of those shoes. First of all, I have 4 sons. They're not going to wear them. And my one daughter would not be able to. There's just so much. So when we think about that, we as adults need to set examples for our children. I told my class, I said, I want you to go grocery shopping with your parents. And I want you to see what your parents buy and how they spend their money. I told them to start having conversations with their parents at the dinner table. First of all, they looked at me and was like, what? We're sitting together at the dinner table? Yeah. We need to get back to that, but that's a whole other conversation. But sit down at the dinner table, talk to your parents about money, tell them about the things that you're learning. Because many of them have never heard this. No one has sat down and told them. You know, I told the children, I said, I asked them to raise their hands and tell me how many siblings they had. And one young lady had several siblings. And it was the holiday season, and I said, so I want everyone to make a list for me. I want you to know what your wish list is. And they all made their list, and then they gave them to me. And I said, you have 5 siblings. And you. How do you expect your parents to do that? How do you expect your parents to provide for all of you? All of those things that are on that list that you want. There's sacrifices that have to be made, and if parents aren't prepared, Christmas comes the same time every year. Y'all do know that, right? So why we get caught off guard, I don't know. I don't know why we get caught off guard. Our children's birthdays come the same time every year. I don't know why we get caught off guard with that either. But then we're scrambling. And I was actually happy that Anthony asked me to come speak now, because right now is a really important time. It's tax season. And we're getting these refund checks. And the one thing that really, really saddens me is when I see people getting $7,000, $8,000, $12,000 in tax refund checks in January and February. And by June, all of that money is gone. Where did that money go? If you didn't use a down payment for a house, if you didn't buy a new car, if you didn't stock that money away in a savings account, because your savings account actually is different than your emergency fund. Your emergency fund should be 3 to 6 months of expenses that it costs to run your house. Your savings is something completely different. That's something that you don't touch. If you didn't do all those things, if you didn't fund something that was of importance, that was in need, I don't know what you did with $12,000. But then I do know, because I can look at their bank accounts and I see where they keep swiping those debit cards. Louis Vuitton does not need your money. Gucci does not need your money. They do not need your money, so much so that you don't have $12,000 in a span of 6 months or less. Foot Locker doesn't need your money. We need to be putting that money in savings accounts. So the next thing we're going to talk about then is a little bit about credit. Credit is a tricky thing, because most people don't really know how it works. They don't. But I'm going to tell you, there's 5 parts to your credit report, to your FICO score. So you have your payment history, which is the most important thing. You need to be paying your bills on time. So that's the first thing you got, is how you pay your bills. Then the amount that's owed on the accounts that you have. That's 30% of it. The length of time that you've had credit. The frequency of you applying for new credit, because you know what? The banks look at that and they're like, okay, well, they just applied for a credit card this month and they got a loan last month, and then what you don't want to do is get a whole lot of credit real fast. Because then they're like, oh, wait a minute, something's going on here. Why do they need all of this credit? Your credit score runs from 300 to 850. Parents, what I want to tell you is the one thing you can do to help your children when it comes to credit, when your child gets to be about 14, 15, if you have a credit card, put your child on your credit card as an authorized user. Put your child on your credit card as an authorized user. What that does is that, I've done that with several cards for my children. When the card came with their name on it, we shredded it. They don't get the card. But when they turn 18 and they get out there in the world on their own, they already have good credit. Because I've already established a credit history for them. So if you can do that, please, that is a gift that you can give your child that will cost you nothing. But it will set them up for success. Because in America, credit is king. You cannot get anything without credit. You can't rent a car. Well, you can rent a car, but it's more difficult. Because if the car's going to cost you $300 and then all you have is a debit card, they'll block off sometimes $600, $1,000. Same thing with if you want to get a hotel. Credit is king. You have to have credit to do anything. Or when you go to do those things, it's going to cost you more. It's going to cost you more to do it. So, those are the main things: saving, budgeting, and credit. Now here's my information. What I want to do is I have also some sheets here that's going to show you how to break down and set up your monthly budget. That's here for you. Please use them. If you have any questions, please contact me. I do one-on-ones. I will take people individually and speak to them and teach you what you need to know. Free of charge. There's no cost for it. Because I want you to thrive. I want you to thrive. I want you to be successful. I want you to have what so many people here don't have. I was blessed. I was blessed. I've always come from a family of affluence. My father was a professional football player. So I always went to the best schools. I went to parochial school when I was young, so all of this is now foreign to me. Private schools. But everybody didn't have that. Some people have to come from the bottom up. At least I got a head start and was able to start off in the middle or a little bit above middle. But I want to see people that look like me. I want you to flourish and thrive. So right now I'm going to open it up. If anybody has any questions about anything, ask.
You are for and welcome. Robin, thank you very much. It's now question time. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and the secretary will bring the mic to you. When the question is being answered and being, answered, I think we will ask our elderly father, Mr. PSC, to translate and then summarize whatever he said, in our language for us.
From people's accounts and stuff. I don't know if you've heard about that. With PNC and Bank of America, people wake up and their monies are not in their accounts. For me, it's quite like a panic. So right now I'm thinking about taking my money from the bank, like the savings or stuff like that. I want your advice on that. Is it true? Is it something that is happening? Should that scare us to take our monies from the bank? I'm worried about that.
Okay, I can't speak to individual financial institutions, but I will tell you this. Believe the information on social media is only as reliable as the person that's putting it out there. If you haven't heard it on the news, please be leery of that. And no, I wouldn't be rushing to take my money out of the bank. First of all, the money in the bank is insured. It's insured. And it tells you that. So when you go in the bank and you see something that says FDIC, that's federally insured. So money just doesn't go missing from the bank. It doesn't happen that way. So.
And one last question. You talked about investment, and you quite mentioned that investment doesn't have to do with like bonds, stocks, and all of that. Investment education is also a part of investment. Now, my question is, most of us, we just save money, and sometimes we have like $30,000, $40,000 sitting in our accounts idle, and we gain like 0.1 interest on it, right? So right now, if I want to invest the money that I have with banks and financial institutions, what advice do you have for me?
Okay, first of all, I would have to sit down and have an in-depth conversation because investing when it comes to something like that is very personal, it's very individual. I need to know what your age is. I need to know what your goals are. Are you going to need the money sooner than later? Are you okay with a higher risk or a lower risk? Because when you start getting into the stock market, you have to understand there is a risk that you can lose some of your money. But then there are also investments that say your principal, maybe the amount that you put in there, you will never lose it. That is safe. There's insurance policies that you can buy. There's annuities that you can buy. So there's different things. But I was asked to speak about investments originally, but I don't speak about that usually in an open forum because of that very reason. It is very individual because what's going to work for you may not work for your neighbor. So if that's something that you want to talk about, if you want to give me your name and number, we can sit down. Like I said, it's free of charge, and we can have a one-on-one conversation about that. Yes, sir.
I have a business account with Kimber. Right now, they're telling me at the end of the year, they're telling me that I have to fill out W-2 forms. I don't understand why I have to fill out W-2 forms. Even though I told them I don't work for them, I just open an account. Why is it that they want me to fill W-2 forms?
W-2 forms that
Yes.
you fill out? You have to ask them. I can't answer that question. And you have to understand, every financial institution may have their own set of rules for opening accounts and things like that. So I can't speak to why they ask you that. I can tell you my financial institution does not require that.
All right, thank you.
And credit unions are a little different than banks. Remember, credit unions are owned by the members. So the people who have accounts there technically own a piece of the credit union. Banks are run differently. Is there anybody else that has a question? And it can be about anything. It doesn't have to be about anything we talked about today. It can be about anything that's money or finance related. The gentleman with a question over here. Question over here.
Put your child on your credit card. At what age can we put them on the card?
Every financial institution is a little bit different. Some of them start as low as 14. Some of them a little bit different age. But you ask your credit card company at what age you can add them, and make sure that you give them their social security number, because if they don't have their social security number, then it's not being reported. That's very important. They will need the child's social security number if you want it to be reported. Anybody else with any questions? Even children, you can ask questions too.
I have a question.
Yes.
My question is in regards to equity in a mortgage.
Yep.
Let's say you have several hundreds of equity in a mortgage, and you take out some of that equity, and then you are asked to pay on monthly basis. Is this something worth it to go for it, or It depends on what you want to use the money for.
Okay, so there's a difference. There's a home equity loan and a home equity line of credit. I usually suggest a home equity line of credit, or they'll call it a HELOC. The reason being is that you can get approved for that. So if you have $200,000 worth of equity in your home, that $200,000 is just sitting there waiting for you to use it whenever you want. You don't pay on it unless you're using it. So when you decide to use it, then you purchase whatever you want to. The interest rate on HELOCs is usually less than you buying, than what you are going to pay. So many times, I will suggest that people, if they want to buy a car, get a home equity line of credit, buy the car with that money, pay cash for the car, and then pay it back that way. The reason being is that usually the interest rate is going to be a lot less. Also, with the home equity line of credit, you only have to pay the interest for the first 10 years. You can pay the principal and interest if you want to, but you're only required to pay the interest. So if there's a month when your money's a little short or something like that, you can just pay the interest and it'll be just fine. So that's what I usually suggest that you do. If you're going to take the equity out, or take the equity out to buy something meaningful, like buy another house or rental property or something like that. Or if you need to have repairs on the house, things like that. There's a couple individuals back there.
I'm just wondering, is 401k a good investment?
A 401k? Absolutely. If your employer is matching and you don't contribute to your 401k, you are giving away money. If they're saying they're going to give you, we'll match up to 4%, you do 4%. Actually, I'm going to tell you to do 10 because that 4%, that's free money. Why would you not do it?
But when the market crashes, you lose all your money.
No, you don't. No, you don't. That's what I'm saying. There's different vehicles. You can choose how you want your money to be invested in your 401k. You pick a riskier or a less risk pathway to take. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, my question is, you said something about assets and liability. You said, let's say you buy a house and as long as you live in the house, it's a liability.
Technically, yes.
Okay, can you elaborate on that? Because it's confusing.
Okay. So an asset is something that you have that is worth money, that brings you money. A liability is something that takes money away from you. Yes, technically, a house that you live in is an asset because you can borrow against it. You can do that. But what I'm saying is, in the grand scheme, it's really not, because you're paying that bank until it's paid off. If you miss a payment, guess what's going to happen? The bank's going to come get that house. They're going to foreclose. If you can't make the payment, now not one payment, but if you lose your job and you go 4, 5, 6 months and you can't make that payment, that house is not yours. That house belongs to the bank until you pay it off. So that's why I'm saying, in one way it is an asset, in another way it is a liability. That's why I always suggest people buy their first home and have somebody else live in it, or buy a double. Especially if you're young, buy a double. Let somebody live on one side and you live on the other side, and let them pay the whole mortgage. You're living for free. You're living for free. Anybody else have any questions?
I'm asking on behalf of someone. She would like to know, do we have different type of savings, like savings accounts? Because you mentioned we should have an emergency, an account, and then have a savings account.
Yes. Most people, I will tell them to set up 2 different savings accounts. One is that emergency fund, like I said, so that you have money in there, you don't touch that. That's literally for emergencies. Car breaks down, medical expenses, you need to do repairs on your home or something like that. Your other savings account is set up for long-term savings. So you might be saving, like I said, to buy a home or something like that. That's what you put that kind of savings for. You might be saving for a big vacation. My daughter and I, we do, even though she's only 15, since she's been 6 years old, we do a mother-daughter vacation every year. And so last year I took her to Hawaii for a week. Well, need to save up for that. It's kind of expensive, you know what I'm saying? So you do that. And then we're going to Italy next year. So we have that, keep putting money in there. And that's what that savings, but that emergency fund never gets touched. No.
Just a follow-up. Is it with the same bank or you can do with different banks?
I'm sorry?
The savings accounts and emergency accounts, can you do it with the same bank?
Yes, you can. You can have as many accounts as you want at any bank. Yeah, you can have as many accounts as you want at any bank. I am going to be honest with you, I think it's a very good idea to have more than one bank. And even though I'm a vice president of the bank, I have more than one bank account at multiple banks. I'm just being honest with you. Is there anybody else has any questions? Thank you, everybody, for your attention.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it one more time for Robin. Thank you. Robin, on behalf of our priest and the church executive and the executive for the 20th anniversary committee, I extend our sincere thanks for your wonderful presentation. I think we've all learned something today, and we are privileged to have you today to talk about financial education during our 20th anniversary celebration. May God richly bless you. Thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you.